I'm getting, from the standpoint about a ceasefire and ultimately a deal, some pretty good vibes coming out of Russia.
Some pretty good vibes coming out of Russia. How about that? President Trump signaling, I think, a fair amount of optimism on a possible Russia-Ukraine ceasefire after Special Envoy Steve Witkoff's Moscow trip. This as Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky continues to call for more pressure on Russia. For more, let's bring in former Moscow CIA station chief, my good friend Dan Hoffman. Dan, there's a lot to cover here. I think I would begin by asking you if it's your sense, as it is the sense of many, that Vladimir Putin will say and do anything to get a deal, but that doesn't mean he'll honor it.
Yeah, I can't be too optimistic here, and it's not for lack of trying on the part of the Trump administration. They're trying as hard as they can to bring peace to a war that has just devastated Europe, the most destructive one we've seen since World War II. But yeah, Vladimir Putin is the KGB operative in the Kremlin. He said he supported the ceasefire proposal, to which Ukraine agreed, by the way, no preconditions. And then Putin went out and laid out some preconditions, which make it impossible to achieve, at least in the immediate term, a ceasefire. He wants serious concessions from Ukraine before the negotiations even begin.
I think there's a couple of things that stand out to me, Dan, as I sort of unpack what's been happening with respect to not just the war itself, but a possible way forward. And so I want you to drill down on the latter, which is if there is to be a ceasefire and, say, a 30-day, 60-day protracted negotiation, what's the likelihood that Ukraine would give up a significant part of its sea coast? I mean, from Mariupol all the way back toward Russia. There are Russian forces in pretty heavily fortified areas there, and I think the sense is the Ukrainians would have to give up a large chunk of that. Does that even begin the conversation, or does that kill it outright?
I think it begins the conversation. Look, Russia had illegally annexed by force about 7% of Ukrainian territory before they launched an invasion in February of 2022. They now occupy a total of about 18% of Ukraine. Putin wants to annex 4 regions which the Russian army doesn't fully control. He'll probably demand that. He wants guarantees that Ukraine will not be able to rearm. He does not want foreign peacekeepers in Ukraine. He said he wants to get to the so-called root causes of the war. That's just Kremlin, KGB propaganda speak for Ukraine can't be independent, and Russia wants their own puppet regime in Kyiv. So, look, the negotiations are going to be painstaking. I'll tell you, the old Soviet-Russian method is just to suck you into these negotiations. And as the old arms control negotiator Max Kampelman used to like to say, they'll put boulders in the middle of the road, figuratively speaking, and then charge you to remove them. So they're tough to negotiate with. I've been there myself many times, and you've got to kind of point your bayonet at their belly at the same time you're talking to them if you want to get results.
This is tough to wrap up on, but in the 15 seconds I have left, if you had to weigh it up and say I'm 50% optimistic that we'll get a ceasefire or less than, where are you, Dan?
Russia launched 130 drones, those Iranian drones, on Ukraine yesterday. So I'm not super optimistic here, but look, keep trying, and we'll see where we get to. And it's dynamic, Kevin. This administration may have to swivel to other policies to get both sides to the negotiating table.
Former CIA Moscow station chief Dan Hoffman, a great friend of the program. Dan, thank you so much. Appreciate it. Have a good weekend.
Thanks, Kevin. All the best to you, too.
Thank you.
Hey, everyone. I'm Emily Campagno. Catch me and my co-hosts Harris Faulkner and Kaylee McEnany on Outnumbered every weekday at 12 p.m. Eastern, or set your DVR. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page for daily highlights.